Everyone, and welcome to another episode of 100 Yards Football Sports Talk Radio. I'm your host and producer this afternoon, Logan Landers, and joining me to talk about the 2024 NFL Draft prospect coming out of Washington, defensive end, Bralen Trice. As always, Mr. Football, Vincent Turner. How you doing, Vincent?
Hey, it's an honor and a pleasure to be on with the most talented guy covering the NFL Draft, Mr. Logan Landers. How you doing today, sir?
Doing well, sir, and I appreciate the kind words as always. But guys, before we get into this draft prospect analysis, if you enjoy this video, please be sure to give us a like, a follow, share, and of course, subscribe so you don't miss a single bit of content. It is draft season now that the NFL is officially over, and we have already been going very heavy with draft prospects, and it's going to get even more high up, and it's going to get turned up to 11 now that the draft is getting closer and closer. So be sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single episode on Facebook and on YouTube, main two platforms there. And if you enjoy podcasts, well, you are in luck because we do have a podcast that goes out each and every single week as well, audio versions of all of our shows. That's thanks to the fine folks over at the Believe Podcast Network. Now, Vincent, let's talk about this guy, 6'4", 274, Bralen Trice, coming out of Washington out there with the Huskies. And this is a guy who has been very, very impressive. Looking at his stats this past season, and he impressed. 49 total tackles on the year, 2 passes defended, 7 sacks, and also 1 forced fumble. And last year, he had a great year also in 2022 with Washington. 39 tackles, he had 10 sacks. And in total in his college career, Vincent, he's gotten 19 sacks. A tackling machine as well. And like I said, 6'4", 274. He's got a really good frame on him. Let's get more in depth about this young man, what we like about him, and just talk more in depth. So as we mentioned, everyone, talked about Washington this year, Vincent, and it was more so their offense. And I mean, rightfully so. You have, of course, Mr. Michael Penix Jr., a guy who had a great year. It's going to be exciting to see where he goes in the NFL draft. But we're going to the defensive line and defensive end here with Bralen Trice, a guy who, as you can see, has a great build with his size, good thick momentum, good thick build, good momentum though. He's not going to have his size limit him in his mobility. Obviously, he's big. He's a strong guy as well. He's good at just playing through the offensive linemen. When I say that, he can bat those hands down. He can get around them. I mean, obviously so, the guy who had 17 sacks in the last 2 seasons. And the thing I like about him too, he's got a good motor. And it's not just in the plays where, he's able to just quickly run by a guy. He's able to get coverage sacks as well whenever the quarterback has a couple of seconds in the pocket, but the backfield is doing their work in the secondary. He keeps pushing late into the play, and he goes and he gets those nitty-gritty sacks that a lot of guys kind of fall off on. And that's something I like about Bralen Trice. He's got good momentum. He's got good speed for a guy of his size. Obviously, his strength is top tier. And he is, and I can't really stress this enough because it's so impressive. Whenever he goes up against an offensive guard, he can just run through them because he's got that low center of gravity. He can push through you. He can chop those arms down, and he can really just push you out of the way at whenever he's feeling like it. And for a guy his size, like I said, coming in at 6'4", 274, he's got sneaky good athleticism, good speed, good footwork. And I think that overall, when you look at Bralen Trice, a guy who also, I failed to mention, had 11.5 tackles for loss this past year, was just an absolute monster and someone who really flew under the radar with that Washington team that did great this year. And I think that when you look at Bralen Trice, it's the guy who has good size. He's already got that NFL size, which you like to see. And as long as you can hone in on him, a guy who goes to a team that has some good veterans around him who can help him out, because obviously no one's a perfect prospect. We always say that. But this guy has a high upside, I think, Vincent, and was one of the better players for Washington this year. I'm excited to see where this big guy is going to go. What are your thoughts on Bralen Trice?
Well, I'm going to tell you this. Washington, everybody, we talked about how great their offense was this year, and rightly so with Michael Penix, Roma Doozy, Jalen Polk, Jalen McMillan. But when you look at it overall, what kept the defense together was this young man right here, because to me, he was the one bright spot. Now, when I look at him, he's kind of an old school football player, Logan. 6'4", 275 pounds. But think about this. 28.5 tackles for loss in his career, 18 sacks, and he had 130 total pressures pressing the quarterback in his career, 30 QB hits, 93 QB hurries. So this is a gentleman, I'm going to go back to it again, a high effort guy. The motor's off the change. It's like changing your oil, and the oil is clean oil. Bralen Trice brings it every play, man. And go back to the college football semifinal game against Texas. He had 2 sacks in that game, and it looked like that every time Washington made a play defensively, he was making a play for the Washington defense, especially on the D-line. But when you look at him, man, it reminds me of Wayne Hamilton that played at the University of Alabama. Got a cape coming, effort. He's got a little bit of Chris Doman, outstanding Hall of Fame with the Minnesota Vikings that played with the Pitt Panthers. Got a little bit of Leroy Salmon, University of Oklahoma, first-round pick, Boomer Sooner. Then, of course, Logan, you're going to like this. And I'm not saying that the gentleman is on the same level as this gentleman, but Logan, help me out. When you look at his effort and continuously hustle and continuously running through D linemen, don't he remind you a little bit of David Pollock?
Ooh, that's a good one. Okay, I like that. I like it.
Don't he remind you a little bit of David Pollock?
A little bit so, yes, sir.
And then, of course, Ox Steele, there was a great defensive end, University of Kentucky, went on and had a great career with the Kansas City Chiefs. Then the gentleman was all first-team Pac-12 2 years in a row. This gentleman right here is going to represent the University of Washington going into the NFL. Can I say the 1991 National Championship team under Don James and Steve Ettman? I like the young man, Bralen Trice, defensive tackle out of the University of Washington.
Yes, sir. My final words, and you did a great summary there. The one thing that we've talked about with this guy is that you're going to see it in the combine next week and obviously on draft day. And that is a motor that, he's got good strength. He's got that high energy. And, I mean, the numbers speak for themselves with how well he's played. You mentioned it, the great game he had against Texas in the semifinals. We know that Washington didn't have the easiest schedule this year. They play a lot of tough teams. And I mean, he got it done against Oregon as well when it mattered most. He played well against a lot of the ranked teams like USC, Utah. I mean, and even if the numbers don't show it, he makes an impact on the game. And that's what I like about Bralen Trice. And that's why, like I mentioned, whatever team he's going to get drafted to in whatever round, he's going to make an impact, Vincent. I believe that because it's not like this guy has to bulk up a whole lot, if any. I mean, you see it on the screen. That's a grown man right there. That's an NFL-looking player already. So as long as he gets the right veterans around him, right coaching staff, I mean, this is a guy who you could really coach into a guy who could potentially get multiple Pro Bowls throughout his career. So I expect big things out of Bralen Trice, and I expect him to do some good work in the NFL. Your final words.
UW. David Pollock, too. I love the young man's a football player going into the National Football League this year in the 2024 NFL Draft. Bralen Trice, you're a football player, my man.
Yes, sir. Well said. Well, guys, if you have enjoyed this episode, give us a like, follow, share, and subscribe on our social media platforms, being on Facebook as well as on YouTube, and also check out our podcast each and every single week. Thanks to our fine friends at the Believe Podcast Network. For Mr. Football, Vincent Turner, I've been your host, Logan Landers. Guys, hope you enjoyed the video, and we'll talk to you guys again on another